The long awaited health overview video is finally here. So let's dive right into it. So, when it comes down to it, I really love never ending optimization problems. I love the tinkering and making the constant improvements and learning new things. And if you think about it, trading is kind of one of those problems. It's one of those things where you never really reach mastery. There's always evolving knowledge, there's always new knowledge to learn and places to improve, and you can always just tweak away. And so, really, personal health to me is an optimization game that you can play to be happier longer in the same way that you can play the trading game in order to make some money. Both good things at the end of the day. So, having succeeded at trading, I'm in the very fortunate position that I get to devote a huge portion of time and resources towards learning a ton about this stuff and working with some incredible experts. One of my best friends is just a total savant holistic health guru. He's the Lance of Holistic Health, where he's spent over a decade traveling around the country and even the globe, learning from some of the best doctors in the business and some of the best practitioners, most importantly. And additionally, I'm currently working with Rapid Health. Rapid Health is a program run by Dr. Andy Galpin and Dan Garner, who right now are probably some of the most respected names in the space. Dr. Galpin has been the guest on, I think, 3 of the top 10 most popular Huberman Labs episodes. And between them and my assigned coach, Dr. Chris Perry, who's a total specimen of practicing what he preaches, it's been an incredible journey that's really getting me to the elite level. And I've found it super fascinating, super fun, and I've really enjoyed the insights I've gotten the privilege of being able to learn. So the intention of this series is I'm going to share all the cool stuff I get to learn and my perspectives on why this stuff matters with the masses. Obviously, I'm not an expert or a doctor. In no way do I have really any true background in this at all, other than I'm just passionate about learning about it. And that's why a lot of this will be more about the practical implementation and my perspective going through all this and the thought process I bring to these decisions. And so even while emphasizing mastering the basics, there are still tons of cool practices and tips to implement those well as well. Additionally, once I get the basics, then I'll dive into some of the advanced stuff I've been doing and learning about, stuff like microbiome healing, nutrigenetics, supplementation, and more of the, Brian Johnson-esque practices. Although I'm sure even Brian Johnson would agree, 95% of this stuff really just comes down to doing the basics very, very, very well. If I've learned anything from the pros, like my coach, Chris Perry, he consistently and relentlessly crushes the fundamentals. And it's funny all those parallels this has to trading, right? And even when I'm working with Dr. Chris Perry, it's so funny because he'll set the standards really, really high for me. And I'm like, what, dude? No way. Okay, fine. If this is the standard you're holding to me to, okay, how much sleep do you get? What's your Oura Ring sleep score like? Or what's your VO2 max? Or what's your this? Or what's your that? And the reality is, with this Rapid Health program, they practice what they preach, and all the people involved really do crush it, and that shows me that this is possible, and it's time for me to up my game. So for now, though, today's video is just going to be the overview and my why of why I do this. And I'd say I've always been into working out, but for the last 5 years or so, the health optimization has really become my number one passion. And I think part of what's so fascinating about it is there's just so many psychological biases involved, just like in trading. And whether we want to think about it or not, these are decisions every single one of us needs to make every single day. What are we going to eat? How well are we going to sleep? Are we going to exercise or not? How well will our social experiences, or I guess just friendships more appropriately, are going to be? And the reality is that it's hard for us to grasp tail risk and make long-term optimal decisions. Most unhealthy things have short-term benefits of pleasure, like the Domino's pizza, or like the Cinnabon, or like the Portillo's, or whatever else, but long-term costs in stuff like health, which is why it's so tempting to fall for the stuff like cigarettes, alcohol, partying really late with friends. And most healthy things have long-term costs. They might not be as palatable or they might not be as enjoyable, but long-term benefits. And the reality is, as I'm going to discuss throughout the series, is that a lot of this stuff, we can find examples that kind of break that paradigm, which I'm going to give towards the end. And I think a lot of this is people never think that they'll be the really, really sick one, or they're going to come down with some disease. And especially I've had friends that have gotten sick. I've had family members pass away, all sorts of things. And you can't imagine what life will be like in those situations. You can't ever see yourself becoming the 60-year-old that can't walk up a flight of stairs. But then life does get you. And I think we often fail to grasp that, like, if we were on our deathbeds and we were given the opportunity to live longer, but we had to follow certain practices, you really don't think you would take it? You wouldn't go back in time and make sure you were eating healthier or working out every day? If you were on your deathbed right now, you had to follow all those things every single day, you wouldn't do that for an extra 5-10 years or something? My guess is that every single unhealthy mess on their deathbed would take that deal, no problem, and know, oh my God, I've been given a new lease on life. And I'm now able to spend more time with friends and family, and these sacrifices are well worth it. But we don't have that perspective, and it only comes to us too late when we can't go back in time. And so when I think about life and kind of like the meaning of life and what the whole point of this whole thing is, one very simplified way I think about this is imagine a chart where on the y-axis, it's just how happy we are, maybe 0 out of 10. And then the x-axis is going to be your years alive. What we really want to do is if we multiply years alive by our average happiness, you can get a unit that essentially is the area under the curve, and it's our just overall total happiness over the course of our life. So if we average being an 8 out of 10 happy and we live 80 years, that's 640 units of happiness. And one simple framework to view life is really, it's kind of our job to like live as happy and fulfilling a life, but part of that also involves longevity, right? And so much of these decisions really come down to trade-offs. Am I willing to do something if it means I'm going to live 10 years longer? Like if you said, Lance, you can't eat steak or any meat, but you're going to live 1 day longer, would I do that trade-off? Hell no. And that's where like a lot of this is trying to figure out like what are the variables involved, what are the benefits. And again, that example was just totally made up. Like I'm not saying meat is necessarily bad at all or that vegetarians do live longer, but the point is that all of this is a trade-off. Am I willing to exercise each day and spend an hour of my time doing that if it gets me maybe 10 years more? You know what? Like if you think in hours terms, an hour of exercise is way less than 10% of our day. Maybe I am willing to do that. And so that's kind of the framework I view this stuff. And I think people make a really dumb argument out there, which is, what's the point when you can always just get hit by a bus? And it's just so stupid and simplistic to think that way because obviously you can die from something random. But the goal is to move the probability spectrum of outcomes most in your favor. On average, right? On average, I want to live as healthy and long and happy as I can. Essentially, you're trying to maximize expected happiness and health over the long run. Same as we may try to maximize expected value in trading, even though any individual trade is susceptible to randomness and any outcome. And I guess what all this is premised on is my belief that with health and exercise, stuff like heart disease and some various issues can become almost non-existent, and even stuff like cancer can hopefully be reduced in probability or delayed, and when and if you do get sick or ill, whether it's a cold, a virus, or something worse, ideally you're more resilient and it'll be less severe. And this isn't just theoretical, right? They do know from the data that people with less inflammation, people with better sleep, people with exercise, your probability of sickness and your severity of sickness is way less. The other thing, of course, is it isn't just about lifespan, which is how long you live, but it's also about health span, which is how healthy and functional and able you are to do all the things you want to do. And this is something that Peter Attia emphasizes a ton, but I personally want to be able to hike and be active and mobile my whole life. And that really takes intentional work and training. And I think one of the other really big fallacies out there is people don't realize what a feedback loop everything is. So many people will chirp at Brian Johnson with the basic retort of, oh, who even wants to live that way? Well, I think what they miss is two things. One, living that way actually puts you on a huge happiness feedback loop. Most people don't realize how much easier it is to be happy when you're getting good sleep, when you're exercising, and when you're eating healthy. Like your body is thriving for that and the whole system works better. The other thing, and probably the point I want to make the most and emphasize the most in this series, is that there's always going to be ways to make the trade-offs more enjoyable versus the status quo. There's going to be ways to find healthy food that's also delicious. It's not and/or, right? It's not just Domino's pizza or a piece of celery, right? There's tons of healthy, delicious food. Then there's also ways to be active and have fun socially. There's ways to make a bedtime routine that's reasonable and consistent, but still enjoyable. Maybe you really like watching a little bit of Netflix. Maybe you really like reading a book. There's ways where those don't need to be inconsistent with having good sleep. And really, it's just that health and happiness are so correlated. Sleep has such a huge impact on your happiness and emotions, and I've realized that for myself. And I recognize that when I am healthy and I feel well and I sleep well and I eat well and I have great social relationships, I am happy, right? So it really is one big feedback loop. None of this stuff lives in a vacuum, and the better your sleep or the better your relationships, the better it is to be mentally happy and fit, and vice versa. All these things work together. And the other thing to recognize is that people have different values. I don't think there's any right decision in a vacuum. There's going to be some trade-offs that I'm willing to make that others aren't willing to make. For example, I don't mind doing weightlifting. I really enjoy it. I've always enjoyed it. Or I don't really mind a lot of vegetables, especially if they're prepared properly. I find them really tasty. But there's stuff like cold plunges where even though sometimes I'll do it, I don't particularly enjoy the cold, and I'm not so convinced that the benefits are worth it given my amount that I don't enjoy it. That being said, there's stuff like sauna, where for me to do an infrared sauna or a sauna with like a couple friends, or for me to listen to music or a podcast and do it, or for me to get morning sunlight while listening to a podcast, these are very, very low burden things that I actually enjoy, and therefore it's sustainable for me to do again and again and again. So a lot of this is going to be tailoring the habits and the trade-offs to you. Right? It's not about not drinking alcohol or not doing X or Y. It's about being intentional about the decisions you're personally going to make, and then finding ways to make those optimal decisions as fun and easy and enjoyable and sustainable as possible. Like, for example, I can play 2 hours of volleyball or pickleball, and there's nothing else I'd rather be doing, even though it's healthy and incredible cardio. And the same enjoyment I might get from fried bullshit food or unhealthy desserts, I can get from a really good sushi dinner, or even a Mediterranean meal where you're having a Greek salad or rosemary lemon chicken. I enjoy that stuff just as much as the pizza. So a lot is building systems so that I go for the healthy decision rather than the fried chicken covered in sugar barbecue sauce instead, when I'm going to enjoy both those meals. So a lot of this series will be the practical trade-offs of making the right decision consistently that works for you and your values. Then, of course, exploring the different tenets of health, how to optimize them and find those leverage points, and then some of the more advanced stuff that I've learned for those that are also passionate about the subject. So thank you for listening. Stay tuned. It's going to be a fun series, not really training related, but I like the breath of fresh air. So hopefully you stay informed and enjoy it as well. Thank you.